Hi, glad to see you on your channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It's important to us. Have a good view. The confrontation between the United States and the USSR during the Cold War eventually marked a new stage in the expansion of the scope of the military-political conflict, whereas previously it had been limited to the surface of the planet and the troposphere. Now space and the upper atmosphere were involved. Immediately, there were projects on weather management. It was supposed to flood, or, on the contrary, to dry up the enemy's territory, to create favorable conditions for bomber aviation, etc. During the Cold War, the U.S. military developed and tested a variety of ways to influence the environment. Meteorologists in the service of the armed forces. In 1947, General George Churchill Kennedy, head of the U.S. Air Force Strategic Command, stated that the nation that first learns to correctly route air masses and then to control the time and place of precipitation will dominate the planet. It is not surprising that these words came from the mouth of a man in the Air Force leadership, since it was aviation more than any other branch of the military that needed the right weather forecast and the right conditions for combat operations. Immediately after the end of World War II, meteorologists from the U.S. Army and a number of research institutes and laboratories began developing plans to use weather phenomena for warfare. It was assumed that the formation of huge cloud masses over Europe and their subsequent movement to the territory of the USSR would help to weaken both the armed forces and the economy of the enemy. With the help of meteorologists, scenarios of military campaigns were developed, where prolonged heavy rains and intensive snowfalls would be used as a defeating force. Precipitation, in addition to its natural effect of overflowing water bodies, floods could, according to American strategists, be used as a means of delivery of biological or radioactive weapons, destroying the enemy's economy, making vast areas unsuitable for agricultural cultivation. Of course, it was assumed that it was possible to achieve the opposite effect: dispersal of clouds in a certain area for the actions of bomber aviation. Historian James R. Fleming writes that up until 1977, when the U.S. signed the Convention on the Prohibition of Military or any other hostile use of environmental modification techniques, the U.S. leadership very well funded and supported work in this area in every way possible. Not surprisingly, most of the meteorologists in the U.S. were in one way or another associated with military projects. Fleming cites that during World War II, the U.S. Air Force trained about 8,000 weather specialists. The Air Force Weather Service employed 19,000 people in 1945, 4,500 of whom held officer ranks. After the end of World War II, for several decades, the number of this service did not fall below 11,000 people. For example, at the beginning of the U.S. campaign in Vietnam, in 1965, military meteorologists had more people than the civilian service, 14,000 versus 4,500, and the U.S. Department of Defense Weather Service budget of $189 million also far exceeded the civilian service's $104 million, the beginning of weather management experiments. It all began in 1946 with experiments conducted by Vincent Schaefer at a General Electric Company laboratory in New York State. He was joined by two other research chemists, Bernard Vonnegut, brother of the famous writer Kurt Vonnegut, and Irving Langmuir, Nobel laureate in 1932, for discoveries and investigations in the chemistry of surface phenomena. Their development was the use of silver iodide to form clouds and cause heavy precipitation. Langmuir was even quick to make the claim that it would be possible to make the arid areas of the southwestern United States extremely fertile in this way. However, the enthusiasm of Langmuir, who announced that the sudden and very heavy snowfall in New York State was the result of the laboratory's work, was not shared by the management of General Electric, which, fearing lawsuits from the victims of the snowfall, predictions of which did not foreshadow, quickly switched the trio of scientists to military contracts. They were to advise the workers of the secret Cirrus project, perispheric cloud, which from 1947 to 1952, as historians note, was made 180 field experiments on changing the state of layered and cumulus clouds, as well as tropical storms. Despite the rather controversial results at the beginning, no effective technique was found to control cloud masses, nor was there a 100% effective chemical agent to help with this. The Air Force decided to extend the project. It was at least clearly established that clouds changed their structure, color, and precipitation when exposed to certain substances, but it was not possible to create a self-sustaining storm or hurricane, or to produce enough precipitation to defeat drought. Langmuir's 1950 experiment with silver iodide in New Mexico apparently coincided well with natural weather cycles, so that precipitation was observed throughout the country. The generals were impressed and decided to test experimentally Langmuir's claims that this was not the limit of the capabilities of weather generators that sprayed silver iodide into the atmosphere. In 1952, it was decided to conduct 5 experiments to create clouds, disperse them, and induce precipitation. The experiments were conducted from Alaska to the Caribbean Sea, but the results were not impressive. Meteorologists who studied the statistical data said that the experiments were not conducted accurately because they did not take into account neither the natural state of the atmosphere nor extraneous influences, for example, from the life of cities or military bases. The matter was further complicated by the fact that weather management had become a lucrative endeavor for some shrewd businessmen who contracted with farmers and assured everyone that they could make it rain within a certain period and predict the weather for a very long time. The popularity of such people was made possible by Langmuir's boastful claims, quickly picked up and widely disseminated by the press and television. Again, the partial success of some of these tricksters, most likely due to the coincidence of their manipulations and weather cycles, was widely discussed and fostered belief in the omnipotence of modern science. For example, the experiments of Wallace Howell and Irving Crick were popularized. The latter cooperated with the Army during World War II, making weather forecasts for the Allied landings in Normandy. The issue of weather management ceased to be a scientific abstraction and became an important part of the political struggle. The problem arose of a mass of lawsuits against both private citizens and the military who conducted their experiments. The military feared that their undivided dominance in this field would be limited by some government agency and the experiments would have to be curtailed, while controlling the military so that the latter would not make trouble for their constituents. The congressmen did not plan to abandon promising research that would win the Cold War. Weather control technology and the war in Indochina. The USSR was also developing weather control projects, which greatly worried the Pentagon and the White House. The number of Soviet specialists employed in the weather service, according to the Americans, was several times the number of such specialists in the United States. Orville and many other politicians and military officers posed the question: who would control air currents and cloud masses in the event of a nuclear conflict? Who would be the first to use the weather to destroy the enemy's agriculture? Such arguments worked well on Congress. The idea that the USSR, which had taken the lead in the space race and had stockpiles of nuclear weapons, could be the first to control the weather was unbearable to many. It was supposed to strike and test weather control technologies on a new front of the superpowers' struggle in Indochina. It seems that during the Vietnam War, Indochina became an arena for testing various military innovations. The U.S. tried to apply there both ultra-modern computer technologies related to the collection and processing of information and technologies related to climate change. As it turned out already in the early 1970s, in the period from 1967 to 1972, the famous Ho Chi Minh Trail, used by the Viet Cong to transfer people and weapons from North Vietnam to South Vietnam and winding through the territory of Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, became the target of Operation Popeye. The cost of the operation's behavior was estimated at about $3.6 million annually. Its essence was to cause heavy rainfall over the trail to erode it and interrupt the supply of Viet Cong troops in South Vietnam. The outcome of the operation is controversial to this day. According to some reports, the amount of precipitation in the area of the trail increased. There are figures from 1 to 7 inches, but correct studies due to objective circumstances have never been conducted. General Westmoreland, who commanded U.S. troops in Vietnam, claimed that there was no increase in rainfall. Most interestingly, something similar was planned by the French during the famous battle for Dien Bien Phu, won by the Vietnamese. Coupled with information about a jungle-destroying operation in North and South Vietnam using Agent Orange, news of Popeye could only serve to further discredit the U.S. command and government. The apparently unsuccessful operation in Vietnam, as well as the shift to new ways of fighting the USSR, coupled with some détente in the international situation, contributed to a cooling off of the ideas of using weather in warfare. In 1977, the USA, together with other countries, signed the Convention on the Prohibition of Military or any other hostile use of environmental modification techniques, which temporarily slowed down all developments in this field, although it did not stop them altogether. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Forget to put a like and subscribe to the channel. It's important to us. See you soon.